When I first started working at the company, I didn't think much of Adam. He was one of those quiet employees who stayed in the background, never really part of any gossip, never joining anyone for lunch, always doing his work with quiet precision. Everyone in the office had an opinion about him. He's odd, some said. He's just socially awkward, others defended. I didn't really care. I was too busy trying to survive my first few months in a new city, learning to juggle reports, deadlines, and late-night coffees that barely kept me awake. But Adam intrigued me, even if I didn't want to admit it at first. He had this calmness about him, a stillness that made him stand out in a room full of people constantly talking over each other. When everyone else rushed to prove themselves, he just listened. When others complained about long hours, he stayed behind, quietly helping whoever needed it. He didn't seem to crave attention, and maybe that's what drew mine. It was a Friday afternoon when everything started. We were all in the break room, half working, half pretending to. Someone brought up dating apps, and soon the conversation spiraled into a loud debate about relationships, red flags, and bad first dates. Adam was there, sitting by the window with his usual cup of black coffee, reading something on his phone. I don't even remember how, but someone joked, "Hey, Adam, ever been on a date?" He looked up, expression unreadable. "Not recently," he said simply, and went back to his phone. Everyone laughed, not cruelly, but teasingly, and the moment passed. But for some reason, I couldn't stop thinking about that short exchange. Maybe it was the way he said it, calm, unbothered, as if he didn't need to defend himself. Later that day, as I was packing my things, he walked past my desk and said, almost awkwardly, "You handled the Henderson report really well. Most people would have given up halfway." I blinked, a little surprised. Compliments weren't something I got often, especially from him. "Thank you," I said, smiling. He nodded once, hesitated for a moment, and then said, "Would you maybe like to grab coffee sometime?" The office went quiet for me, even though no one else heard it. I think I stared too long before answering. "Coffee?" I repeated, trying not to sound shocked. He nodded, clearly bracing for rejection. "Just coffee. No pressure, I don't know what made me say yes. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe kindness. Or maybe I just wanted to see if there was something more behind that quiet exterior." Either way, I found myself agreeing, and the look of surprise on his face almost made me laugh. He smiled, a small, genuine smile, and said, "Saturday, 3 p.m., there's a small cafe near the park." I agreed, and that was that. Saturday came faster than I expected. I almost canceled twice, partly because I was nervous, partly because I didn't know what to expect. He wasn't the kind of man who left you guessing about superficial things like outfits or restaurants. He was unpredictable in a way that felt sincere. When I arrived at the cafe, I saw him already there, sitting near the window, wearing a dark blue sweater that somehow made him look both simple and thoughtful. "Hey," I said, approaching. He looked up and smiled, that same quiet smile. "You came," he said softly. "I was half sure you'd change your mind." I laughed nervously and sat down. "I almost did," I admitted, and he chuckled, stirring his coffee slowly. We talked. Not about work, not about office drama, but about books, music, life. He spoke differently from most people I knew. Every word felt deliberate, meaningful. He listened. Really listened. And when he talked, it was as if he had thought about it 100 times before saying it out loud. There was no arrogance, just depth. About half an hour in, he suddenly looked toward the door, as if expecting someone. Then, before I could ask, he said, "I hope you don't mind, but I brought someone." My heart sank for a moment. The first thought that flashed through my mind was, what kind of date is this? Then I saw her. A little girl, maybe 6 or 7, with brown curls and bright blue eyes that looked too much like his. She ran toward him and hugged him tightly, smiling with missing teeth. "Sorry I'm late, Daddy," she said. My mouth went dry. Daddy. The word echoed in my head. He smiled down at her, kissed her forehead, and said softly, "You're right on time, Lily." Then he looked at me, a little embarrassed. I know this isn't normal, but I didn't want to lie to you either. This is my daughter. I was silent for a moment. Shocked, yes, but also strangely moved. He looked genuinely apologetic, not like someone who had planned this to manipulate the moment. Her mom... He started, then paused, choosing his words carefully. Her mom passed away 3 years ago. Since then, it's just been the two of us. I didn't know what to say. There was something raw in his voice, not rehearsed or pity-seeking, just honest. The little girl climbed onto his lap and looked at me curiously. "Are you Daddy's friend?" she asked. I smiled, nodding. "I guess I am." The awkwardness melted faster than I expected. Lily was bright, funny, and endlessly talkative. She told me about her drawings, her favorite ice cream flavor, and how she wanted to be a teacher. I found myself laughing more than I had in weeks. Adam watched her with a kind of quiet pride that made my heart ache a little. There was love in his every gesture. The way he fixed her hair, the way he listened to her, the way he smiled even when she interrupted him mid-sentence. By the time the coffee turned cold, I had forgotten it was supposed to be a date. It felt more like being invited into someone's small, sacred world. When we finally stood to leave, Lily hugged me around the waist completely unprompted. "Bye," she said brightly. "You're nice. Daddy smiles more when you're here." Adam looked both embarrassed and grateful. As we walked out of the cafe, he said softly, "I didn't plan that." She insisted on coming when she found out I was meeting someone. I couldn't say no, I smiled. "You don't have to apologize. She's wonderful." We walked together for a while, talking about life, about loss, about what it means to start over. I learned that he used to be more social, more open, until his wife died suddenly from an illness. Since then, he had focused entirely on raising Lily, working hard, keeping his world small and safe. "People at the office think I'm strange," he said with a small laugh. Maybe I am. But I guess when you lose something that big, small talk feels different. I didn't argue. I understood more than he knew. My own life had its quiet scars, not the same as his, but deep enough to make me recognize pain when I saw it in someone else's eyes. When we finally said goodbye, he looked at me and said, "Thank you for not walking away when you could have." I smiled, genuinely this time. "Thank you for being honest." That night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't stop thinking about the look on his face when he held his daughter's hand. The tenderness, the strength. There was something beautiful about a man who carried his pain and still managed to love. I didn't know where this would go, or if it would go anywhere at all. But for the first time in a long while, I felt something different, something real. And deep down, I knew that coffee wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning of something that would change both our lives in ways we couldn't yet imagine. Over the next few weeks, things changed quietly, almost imperceptibly, like the first signs of spring after a long winter. I didn't mean for it to happen. The texts that became longer, the coffees that stretched into dinners, the simple walks that turned into conversations about everything that mattered. But that's how real things begin. Not with grand confessions, but with small, ordinary moments that start to feel essential. At work, Adam remained the same calm, composed man, but every now and then, when our eyes met across the room, there was a flicker of something familiar, a warmth that only we seemed to recognize. People started noticing. Office gossip, as always, found its way through the cracks. "You and Adam?" One of my colleagues asked one day, her eyebrows raised. "You're joking, right?" "He's sweet, but come on, he's weird." I smiled, brushing it off, but it stayed with me longer than I wanted it to. Maybe it was the tone, the disbelief that someone like him could be worthy of something genuine. And maybe that was when I realized just how cruel people could be toward quiet souls who didn't fit into neat little boxes. One Thursday evening, we stayed late finishing a report. It was almost 9 p.m., the office half dark, the hum of fluorescent lights filling the silence. I leaned back in my chair, rubbing my eyes, and said, "I think I'm officially coffee now. 90% caffeine." He laughed softly, that gentle, deep laugh that always made me forget the rest of the world. "Then I'll make sure you don't evaporate." He stood up and walked to the vending machine, bringing back 2 paper cups. He handed me one, still steaming. We sat in silence for a while, sipping, just listening to the rain outside hitting the glass. Then, without looking at me, he said, "You know, people have been talking." I hesitated. "I know," he sighed, turning the cup slowly in his hands. "I didn't mean to make your life complicated." "You didn't," I said, though my voice sounded softer than I intended. "I make my own choices." He finally looked at me, eyes steady. "You sure?" Something in his tone made my chest tighten. "Yes," I said, holding his gaze. "I'm sure." There was a quiet understanding between us after that, something that didn't need to be spoken aloud. The next weekend, I met Lily again. She remembered me instantly, ran to me with a bright smile, and took my hand as if we'd known each other forever. Adam watched with quiet amusement. We went to the park, where Lily insisted we feed the ducks. She laughed every time they splashed too close, her laughter like sunlight. It was strange how natural it felt. The three of us? For a moment, I could almost see it, the version of life where this was normal, where Sunday mornings meant pancakes and laughter, not loneliness and deadlines, but reality always has a way of testing you just when you start to believe in something good. A few days later, HR called me in. The tone was polite, but the meaning was clear. Someone had reported unprofessional conduct. Apparently, my closeness with Adam had become a topic of discussion. I defended myself calmly, explaining that our personal lives didn't interfere with work, but the meeting left me cold inside. That evening, I told Adam. He went quiet for a long time, his jaw tightening. "I'm sorry," he said finally. "I should have been more careful." "It's not your fault," I said. "People just don't like what they don't understand." But I could see the guilt in his eyes, heavy and real. The next few days, he grew distant again, polite but withdrawn. He stopped joining me for lunch, avoided small talk. It hurt more than I wanted to admit. Then, one night, he showed up at my door. It was raining again, the same soft drizzle that always seemed to follow our story. He looked tired, soaked, holding something small in his hand, a folded paper, slightly wet. "I got a job offer," he said quietly. "Different city, better pay. It would be good for Lily," I froze. "When?" 2 weeks. The world seemed to blur. "So you're just leaving?" He didn't answer right away. "I don't want to, but I can't let you get hurt because of me." I felt my throat tighten. "You think this is about pity? Or about what people say?" "No," he said, his voice breaking a little. "It's about not wanting you to lose something you've worked so hard for. You have a future here. I can't be the reason it collapses." I didn't cry then. I just stood there watching the rain slide down his face, mixing with everything he couldn't say. He handed me the paper, a drawing. Lily's. It was the three of us holding hands under a big yellow sun. Beneath it, in crooked letters, she'd written, "My family." That's when I broke. He pulled me into his arms, holding me tightly, like someone trying to remember the shape of something before losing it. We didn't speak. There was nothing left to say. The next days passed in a blur. He resigned quietly, no drama, no goodbye party. The office went back to its usual rhythm, indifferent as always. I tried to focus on work, but every time I saw his empty desk, it felt like something missing inside me echoed in that space. Then, one Friday afternoon, a small envelope appeared on my desk. No name, no note, just my name in his handwriting. Inside was a single sentence. "Some things don't end. They just wait." It's strange how words can hold you together when everything else falls apart. Months passed. I tried to move on. New projects, new friends, pretending that life was fine. But every now and then I'd see something. A father with his daughter, a man laughing over coffee. And my mind would drift back to him. To that quiet strength. To the way Lily had called me family without hesitation. Almost a year later, I got an email. The subject line was simple. Hey, it was from him. He wrote that they were doing well. Lily was starting second grade, she'd made friends, she was drawing more than ever. And then at the end he added, "We're visiting the city next week. If you're free, she'd like to see you." So would I. My hands trembled as I read it. When we met again, it was at the same cafe, the same table by the window. Time had changed small things. His hair a little shorter, his eyes a little older, but the warmth was still there. Lily ran straight to me, hugging me so tightly I could barely breathe. "I missed you," she said. Adam stood there, smiling that same quiet smile. She wouldn't stop asking if you'd still remember her. "I could never forget her," I said, my voice soft. We sat down, and for a while, it was as if the year had melted away. He told me about the new job, the small house near the lake, the quiet life they'd built. Then he said, almost shyly, "You know, she keeps drawing you in her pictures. I think she misses the way things were." I smiled, looking at Lily, who was busy drawing something even then. "What about you?" I asked quietly. He met my eyes. Every day, the cafe faded around us. There was no need for explanations. Sometimes love doesn't announce itself. It just waits patiently until you're ready to return. As we walked out, Lily slipped her tiny hand into mine. "Daddy says we're moving back soon," she said cheerfully. I looked at Adam surprised, and he nodded. I took a transfer. The city's home. Maybe it's time to stop running. Something inside me eased. For the first time in a long while, the future didn't feel uncertain. It felt possible. That night, as I watched them drive away, I realized that love isn't about perfect beginnings or grand gestures. Sometimes it's about showing up, even when it's inconvenient, even when people don't understand, even when it hurts. It's about the quiet ones, the kind ones, the ones who bring their whole world with them and still make room for you in it. And in that small, flickering moment under the city's fading lights, I knew that some stories don't end when you stop seeing each other every day. Some stories end only when you stop believing in them. I never did. Months later, I moved into a small house near the lake, the same one he'd described in his emails. There were 2 mugs on the kitchen counter, one slightly chipped. On the refrigerator, a drawing, 3 figures under a yellow sun. This time, Lily had written beneath it in bigger, neater letters, "Home." And that's exactly what it felt like.